some of you who are joining may not be that familiar with Lyme Connect. So I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about us. We are a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to rebrand disability through achievement. We do that by attracting, preparing, and connecting high potential professionals and university students, including veterans, who have all different types of disabilities into our network. So if you're joining us as an individual with a disability and you're not a member of our network, I encourage you to join. Once you are a member of our network, you'll be eligible for all of the different scholarships, leadership program, internships, and full-time careers with the world's leading corporations, our partners. And for those of you who are joining from our partner companies, we also support you with your recruiting efforts and onboarding, developing, retaining, and promoting all employees who have disabilities. So again, if you are a person with a disability, please join our network. And if you are not a person with a disability, but you'd like to keep up to date on all the Lyme Connect events, you can join as a friend of the Lyme Network. And I'm sure we'll be sharing that link in the chat. So as we know, February is Black History Month, and so we are really excited to have 4 of our network members who are in Canada and the US who live with disabilities. They're here today to share their experiences with all of us. And our moderator for this discussion is Nancy Oduro. Nancy is a graduate of Georgetown University, and she earned her MBA from Stanford University Graduate School of Business. She currently is the engagement manager at Dublin, where she focuses on human-centered design and innovation. And Nancy has a long history with Lyme Connect, first as a network member, and then she was one of our fellows from the class of 2011. And we are so happy that she now serves on our global board. So Nancy, I'm happy to turn this session over to you so that we can meet the panel.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. And thank you all for joining. It's really exciting seeing the numbers climb up. I'm really excited for our panel today. We have an amazing group of people who really have just had truly amazing experiences. And so I want to kick us off with introductions. So Alfred, if you could get us started, just give your name, your position, what you're doing at Goldman, and just a little bit about your disability.
Thanks, Nancy. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Alfred Woodward. My pronouns are he, his, and him. For visual description for anyone that may be blind or low vision, I am an African-American man with shoulder-length locks, with probably too much facial hair to come from Goldman Sachs, but I have a beard, and I'm wearing a traditional top that's green and other colors. And I actually am really glad to be sporting a virtual background from our Goldman Sachs Black History Month. It's a virtual background with stripes of kente and other colors like red, green, and blue. So really happy to be here. I have been at Goldman Sachs for around 70 years. It'll be 70 years in May. So time flies. I started off as an intern in 2014. I started my career off in operations, and in 2020, I transitioned over into HR. And right now, my current role, I serve as the associate for diversity recruiting, covering our HBCU strategy as well as our neurodiversity hiring initiative. I identify as neurodivergent. And I'm here to talk about my journey and pathway with mental health.
Awesome. Thank you, Alfred. Anita?
Sure. Hi. My name's Anita. I am currently a student at Harvard Law School. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And for a visual description, I'm a Black woman wearing glasses with about shoulder length, like mid-back length hair, and a blurred background so that you guys can't see the state of my room right now. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to this event. And yeah.
And Anita, if you could give a little bit about your disability.
Sure. So I was born with a stutter, and it's gone in and out throughout my life. It's better on some days, worse on some days, and under different situations. So yeah, I'm really excited to if anyone else has a speech impediment here, I'm really happy to get into that.
Thank you, Anita. And David?
Yes, hello, my name is David Mercury. I don't know if my video is working now. I think it is. For anyone who's on, my video may cut in and out. I'm having problems with it. But anyway, currently, I'm a lawyer. I've had a number of different careers. I've been a gospel singer. I've been a police officer. I worked on the drug squad. Then I became a lawyer, and I'm going to be starting in January, begin training in medical school. So I've had different careers. I identify with the traditional male pronouns, he, him, his, and my disability was a very, very severe and long-lasting depression, which was very costly and very, for me, very shaming, even though I now recognize that that is part of the illness, part of the disease of depression. But it was really, that was really disabling for me. So I'm here to talk about that and to enjoy meeting my fellow brothers and sisters who have succeeded through the disability. I'm really enjoying that.
Thank you, David. And to give a visual descriptor as well of myself, I am a Black woman with shoulder-length hair. I'm wearing a multicolored sweatshirt, and I've got my African art behind me, which is some of my favorite. So I'm going to jump right in. You all really have very diverse experiences being Black people with disabilities, and I think it would be great if you could talk a little bit about what your journey has been like. I know for some, you have things that you've been dealing with since you were born or since you were very young. For others, some things came on later in life. And so I'll start with you, David, if you want to talk a little bit about just what your journey has been and how it's impacted you both personally and professionally.
Sure. Okay. So I've suffered depression 3 different times in my life, but this last episode was the most severe. And apparently that's what happens with depression. If you have it multiple times, it gets worse each time. And it was very costly for me. The way I describe it is I say that my depression cost me everything. I lost my marriage, fell apart, and I lost all of my material goods. I lost my house, I lost my car. I couldn't work. I worked for myself, so I wasn't able to work. And I lived off my savings, and then my savings ran out. I had to put all of my furniture and everything I owned in storage, and then I couldn't pay for the storage. So I lost all of that. So when I say I lost everything, material, I lost everything, but most debilitating was I lost myself. I no longer believed in myself. I was living in fear, which is something that was new to me. I just didn't. I was immobilized. I couldn't do anything. When I lost my house, I remember getting a notice because I was behind on my mortgage, saying that they were going to repossess my house and sell my house out from under me. And I didn't do anything about it. I sat on the couch. I sat on the couch for 2 months before the day finally came, and I just did nothing. I had no energy. And of course, my family, I was used to being sort of the go-to guy in my family. I was no longer that. And my family didn't understand depression, as I didn't, even though I was the one suffering from it. And so my family lost faith in me. I could see how people looked at me differently. And I can remember just like walking my dog. I'd be walking my dog up Yonge Street, which is a major street in Toronto. and seeing people in restaurants. And that's something I used to be able to do, and I could no longer do that. I felt like I was no longer participating in the world. I was on the outside, looking in kind of thing. And just feeling overwhelming shame. That was the thing that really hit me, was I felt overwhelming shame. And I'll just tell one quick incident. I started working for Apple, and as a lawyer, and I was at a really busy practice, successful practice, you wear suits, and I had nice suits and nice clothes. And now I'm working at Apple wearing a t-shirt, and I would hide when someone came into the store who knew who I would, who knew me as a lawyer. And one day at the end of the shift, the manager asked me to mop the floor. And so I did. And then, being a grown man with a daughter, after I finished, I went and sat in my car, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried, because here I am, from having a very successful law practice to working a job mopping the floor. And not that there's anything wrong with mopping the floor, but I had worked so hard to be something else. So that's just a bit of my story. I don't want to go on too long, but I am here to answer any questions.
No, thank you for sharing that, David. And I know when we spoke, you have a tremendous story also around how you found yourself again, because I know that you mentioned, feeling like you really lost yourself. And so we'll get to that in a minute. But I do want to go over to Anita. You talk about your speech impediment and how it has affected you, and you're in Harvard Law now. And so could you talk a little bit as well about your journey and how your disability has helped, or at sometimes maybe even felt like it was a barrier?
Sure. So I guess just to start, my parents started noticing some disfluencies in my speech when I was around 2 years old. And it was kind of expected, since my dad also had a bad stutter. So it wasn't, a surprise, but that's something that I inherited from my dad. And we moved to the US when I was around 6 years old. And, kind of like it was an adjustment for sure, in the sense that coming into second grade with a speech impediment and like an accent, it was, and kids can be cruel sometimes. So I think that was definitely something that I had to kind of work through. I remember being younger and watching the news, like NBC, to first of all pick up the American accent, but also just to see how people could talk so well and fluently, just off the cuff. So like I went through a lot of speech therapy, and it's gotten a lot better as I've grown. I've also learned some tactics about how to stall, how to, like, each sentence to me is kind of like I know words I'm probably going to struggle with, like, P's, Q's, like hard consonants trip me up. So they're just a lot of, it's strange to view speech that way, kind of like as a path, and there are like stones along the way, and I'm like, all right, how am I going to get around this and around that, and like with each word. So yeah, I think that as I've gone through school and having to like pass up plays or things that I just couldn't, that I thought that I couldn't do, or that were beyond me because of my speech impediment. But as I've grown, it's become easier to just own it, because it's like, it's a part of me. It's not going away, and it's something unique about me. I kind of like it sometimes. So I think that that's just kind of how I viewed it. I've never turned down an opportunity now to speak, because I think it's important to value my words and my thoughts. And yeah, I think that that's kind of been a rough overview of my journey. I think it's still ongoing, and I still try to do do the work with myself every day to be like, no, like speak up, say what you want, say what you want to say. It's okay if it is kind of choppy, but it's still worth it at the end of the day. So yeah, I can go in deeper into specific things, but yeah, I would say that's like a rough overview.
Thank you, Anita. And Alfred, I know you talk a lot about the mental health breakthrough that you had while you have been at Goldman Sachs. And so can you also talk a little bit about what your journey's been like and how you have used it to just really find your own self and your own voice at your job?
Yes. And I just want to say to my fellow panelists, I just want to thank you for sharing your stories. I'm like, these are amazing stories. And I feel like, you know, when it came to my mental health breakthrough, Nancy, as you called it, it came at a point where I was not expecting it at all. I had been at Goldman Sachs for about 4.5 years. I just got promoted to associate. And I was covering, you know, different projects and things like that. And then one day I came into the office. It was an 8 a.m. Circle up to talk about, you know, what's the latest, what project updates, things of that nature. And I was having the conversation, and as I stood in one spot, I could see myself like maybe like 10 feet behind me, and the words that I was saying echoed in my head. And it came out, the update came out perfectly, of course, it came out fine. However, I realized in that moment that I wasn't saying them. It was almost as if it was on autopilot. And so after I gave the update and after we kind of like broke off into our daily tasks, I, you know, asked my manager if she had a moment to chat with me. Um, Still not really understanding what was going on in myself. And we went into a room, and I just broke into tears. And I think it was, the tears came from a place where I'd always counted myself to be someone who was, you know, even killed, you know, had a good head on their shoulders. And it was the emotion behind what I was feeling. I just didn't quite feel like myself, that I couldn't even put into words. It was the struggle of being in a different place, that led me to that moment. And she said, it's fine. We went outside, we took a walk outside, we went and we sat along, well, this is our Jersey City office, so it sits along the Hudson. So we sat near the water, and we talked. And speaking about like the experience, you know, it does make me feel emotional because it takes you back to that place. But I didn't necessarily feel like anything was wrong. I felt like I had arrived in a sense. Like the sky looked bluer to me for some reason, trees looked greener, and I just knew that I was in a different place than I had been uh, the week before, the day before. And it happened very quick. So I asked for some time off. You know, I had some support. I had a very supportive manager, very supportive leaders at the firm, and I was approved for medical leave. And I had 2.5 months to really figure out what was going on with me. And a part of that medical leave is also to see a psychotherapist. And so I walked away from that time with the diagnosis of having a like dissociative disorder. And although it's not something that I like take medication for now, because it doesn't affect me in the same way it did at that moment in time, I know that I'm forever changed. And I say that to say that experience, that maybe to others appeared like a breakdown, was really my breakthrough into understanding a couple things about myself. One, I didn't enjoy what I did for work. I managed operations. It was a regulatory role, which was fine in the onset, but I felt as if my being said, we want to do something different. And throughout that medical leave, I honestly was praying. I said, hey, I want to come back to Goldman and go into a different job. Um, when I was filling out some papers for my medical evaluation, my now manager, Lisa Douglas, reached out to me and said, hey, I have this role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been looking for you. When I would love to chat with you, want to get you into this role. And so after my medical leave ended, and I was able to kind of gain some tactics of like, of how to ground myself and really kind of be present. And I walked into this thing. I had 7 interviews, and then I transitioned to a team that where I was doing my passion. So I say that mental health episode and breakthrough was me, my being, making sure that I broke my own mold, and to say like, hey, you're not doing something that you feel like you're called to. Let's get you on the path to do that. And so I always included in some way, shape, or form in my story of my path at Goldman Sachs, because one, we need to speak about it. And one, if you don't, and then two, if you do not move, your being will make you move into a different place, into a different phase. Whether or not you think that you're ready, your being will say, "We're done with this," and you can shut down. So you have to be aware of yourself and be able to manage that accordingly. But that was my story, and that is the journey I had for my mental health breakthrough, and why I'm such a champion of it today.
Thank you, Alfred. And talk about what's ordained for you is going to be for you. The fact that this world that seems so perfect for you and your career is ready for you after your breakthrough is incredible. And I'm also really glad that you brought up support and requesting medical leave and knowing that that's what you needed. I'm going to open this up to anyone, but in your careers, how did you find the comfort to ask for whether it's accommodations or medical leave? And what was that process like for you? Was your company supportive or your manager supportive? If they were or they weren't, how did you navigate that?
I can take that just because I can like lean into what I just shared. I asked my manager for 3 sick days. I said, let me get 3 sick days. I think I should be fine. And then because she's like, no, let's get you the full extent of help that you need. And my MD at the time, Allison O'Connor, she said, hey, look, you're already approved. We're approving you for medical leave. Take the time. And the firm is supporting you. So that it was a blessing for me, that that reputation that I had built got me this paid medical leave to really figure things out and not have to worry about accommodations and things like that. And so that was extremely helpful, and a lot of firms offer it. So it's something that if you're looking for that break, you should definitely like research it and see what's available. And then it came up the piece around the medical evaluation. So you have to get evaluated by a psychologist or a psychotherapist. And this is where I know the firm is also still growing. The recommendations that they gave me, none of the therapists were Black, and that was important for me, because I know that there's different cultural things like the religion that I practice, a cultural background, where I didn't want to get the wrong diagnosis by someone that didn't understand baseline, where I'm coming from as a Black man, as someone, as a Black LGBTQ plus man, as a person who practices African spirituality. There's just a certain baseline of understanding that I would want my therapist to have, and not necessarily cultural competence, but cultural humility and understanding that plays a role. And so I did not go through the therapist that they sent. I actually found a Black psychotherapist in Brooklyn, and went with them. But the overall process of requesting the accommodation was good. But I know sometimes you might have to tweak it a bit to make sure that it's appropriate for you.
Yeah. And Anita or David, for you both, did you ever have to request accommodations, or even if it's not accommodations, just taking a step back to ask for the help that you may have needed at any given time?
Well, David here, as for me, because I worked for myself, there was no HR, there was nobody to go to. Added to that, like I said, this shame that I felt, which really held me back. It prevented me from asking for help, for asking for understanding. And what happened with me is I just reached the point where I wasn't servicing my clients. I couldn't even make it to court on time. And I had a very busy practice. I was in court every day, bar none. There was never a day in 12 years of practice that I wasn't in court. So, and even most weekends, because I had such a busy practice, and most of my clients were either gangbangers. I went through a period of time where most of my clients were pedophiles or hebephiles. So they were always getting arrested. So I would always be in court even on Saturdays and Sundays for bail hearings. And so I wouldn't ask for help. And the Law Society played a big role in me getting help, because what happened is I had all these complaints coming in, people couldn't get a hold of me, and they were getting ready to discipline me. And then they looked at my record and they looked at my practice and they realized that I was behaving in a manner that was uncharacteristic. And so rather than taking care of the complaints under the discipline arm, they shifted me to the incapacity arm. And so, you know, I was no longer facing allegations that I was doing things wrong. I wasn't stealing money. I wasn't stealing out of the trust account, that kind of thing. I had this illness and I wasn't able. And until they were doing that, I was hiding. I was hiding from the world, again, because of this shame. It was like a tsunami that just washes over you. And because I had such a successful practice, and when I went into law, I've lived my whole life with people telling me I couldn't do things. They told me I would never be a police officer. They told me that I would never, work on the drug squad. They told me I would never get into law school. Like my whole life has been overcoming people telling me that I can't do something and me proving that I could. And so I think also my becoming ill, I was making it a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that, oh no, I can no longer do this. So I didn't have anybody. Hearing Alfred's story is wonderful, but I didn't have that. But until I too found a Black doctor, and he was a psychiatrist who also practiced psychotherapy. And it was such an elation, because I had seen other doctors before, but again, this is a man who, because he lived in Toronto, lived in Canada, he lived all over the world actually, but he could identify with some of the things I was facing as a Black man, because they do intersect, the illness and the fact that I'm Black, a Black man, they do intersect. And so he was able to help me a lot. And I'm still seeing him to this day. And I'll probably be seeing him for the rest of my life. And what I try to make people understand is, it's not that I'm ill in the way that I was before, but I no longer want to be ill like that again. So I will do everything that I can to make sure I'm never in that place again. And for me, there's no shame in it any longer. And that was a big thing to overcome, is don't feel shame. You don't feel shame if you have cancer. You don't feel shame if you break a leg. This is an illness like anything else. And I think I'm being responsible in that. I will continue to see him and to make sure. And you know what? He's become a good resource for me to bounce things off of, bounce my feelings and emotions off of.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. And in that same vein, I want to talk about how we show up, right? We're at a particular moment in time where, there's a lot going on in the world, but particularly as Black people and Black people who identify as having disabilities, there are a lot of things competing on our everyday that could affect how we show up just as our own people. But when you think about professionally showing up for your friends, your family, etc., it can really take its toll. And so I would love, and I'll start with you, Anita, for you to talk a little bit about showing up and how you feel you can show up as your authentic self, especially as you think about being in school currently and being in the legal profession. What helps you to feel like you can show up authentically? And maybe there are times where you feel like you can't, and maybe you feel like you have to hide parts of what you're feeling. But whether it is one way or the other, I would love to hear what your experience has been like. And if you could just talk about how you show up.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like one of the most debilitating things about having a speech impediment is that, like, every time before you open your mouth, you're not only there's my mom always used to say, think before you speak. You don't do anything except think before you speak when you have a speech impediment, because every sentence is it's like you have to think through it. So I think that, like, the way that I show up is that I just try to think a little bit less, because I think that how like the constant worrying about, oh, am I gonna stutter, am I gonna go through this sentence fluently, or is it going to be a big trip up and then everyone will know? And it's just like, so I honestly think that pressure or that fear is a lot of the reason why I wouldn't necessarily I was a very quiet kid. I just tried not to put myself in that situation where people would know that I had a speech impediment. But I think that now the way I show up is that I just care and think like a tiny bit less. It's still good to think think before you speak, of course, but I think that there's no way for me to show up as myself. I am terrified of, like, stuttering in between the sentence. So that's kind of what has helped me show up a bit more, both in the classroom. I haven't been in the workforce that long. I worked for 1 year last year, over Zoom. So I wouldn't even say that I've, like, officially joined the workforce yet. But even in, like, team meetings, the classroom, the thing that helps me show up as best as I can is just to just own every word that I say, whether it's fluent or not. So yeah, I think that that's what's helped me show up. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You perfectly answered it. And I love what you were saying just around letting go of what it sounds like the fear that sometimes comes with having a disability that people don't understand. So, thank you for sharing that. Alfred, I would love to also come to you and just hear how you have felt like you show up, and the things that have allowed you to show up fully as yourself, and if there have been situations where you feel like you couldn't have.
Yeah, I would say in the beginning of my career, I'm from a Black town. I'm from Flint, Michigan. I went to Howard University, a Black school, and so I always felt comfortable in my spaces, and going into Goldman Sachs, I still felt comfortable, but then I just noticed that there were different nuances where I had to ensure that I was, actively not playing into a stereotype, right? And being able to navigate that while being authentic. As a black gay man, I came into the role with that mindset and being proud. I was proud to go to Howard University. I was proud that I actually came out in my internship. And I think that just coming into the role and having that piece of you that is exposed, that was empowering. Now, I did have certain situations and moments where maybe people's different thought process or biases led them to say certain things, but I honestly couldn't allow that to hold me back from
Right.
doing what I know I can do. A story of a manager that's no longer at the firm. Quick story. I was giving a presentation I was going to give a presentation on what the team does to our newest global head of operations, and they chose me, and I was overthinking it, and I wrote down, I like scripted out myself, and I came to the room with these two managers, and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to say. I just want to make sure that you guys like it. And they said, Alfred, get rid of the script. We chose you because of the way that you can casually speak, the way that you come across, and you don't have to sound what you think, maybe an analyst at Goldman Sachs should sound like. We want you to be you. And it was very empowering to get that affirmation early in my career, that even though I may not have the same vernacular as other people, that my personality shines through, and I'm professional, and they're choosing me to give this presentation. In the same moment, after the manager left, who happened to be Black, and I was with my manager who identified as white. My manager, it was a joke, but he said, "Oh, when you meet the global head, make sure you don't." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Make sure you don't, and at the time I was a very formal person. So I, even at Howard, I would literally shake people's hands. And so I was taken aback by what he said, and I was like, this is something I have to address later. The guy is coming down the hall. So like, though, that was that moment where, it's the affirmation, but then you have to also like account for people's bias, whether that, really attaches itself to you or not. That like, let me show you what I do, and really kind of like move past that. And then as I've kind of grown in my career, and adding in the mental health component, when I came into diversity, equity, inclusion, after a year, I had the opportunity to basically serve as the America's network advisor. So basically the HCM advisor of our ERG for disabilities. And I came into that role telling the heads that, look, I identify with the community. I'm not the HCM rep. This is our network. So, how can we make it the best that it can be? And I think when you're being authentic, and you're making it, and you're tying it to how that you're passionate about what you're doing in these different projects, or how you show up, I think it's always going to be beneficial. And so last small story, I was having a normal catch up. My manager asked me to meet with someone, and like I said, I bake into my GS journey my mental health breakthrough, and I shared it, and I finished. I finished. I was like, oh, so like, like basically like, so tell me about yourself. Uh, the young brother was in tears. His eyes had welled up, and he, very, very nice guy, very sweet guy, out of Philly, and sorry, out of Buffalo. And he said, wow, that really took a lot of courage for you to say that. He didn't say courage, but he said, it takes you a lot of courage to be able to say that. I went through something similar, and I saw this statistic that said 80% of Black Americans are reluctant to see a therapist, or to be associated with the mental illness. But the fact that it is so prevalent, it's important I feel like it's important for me to be able to be vocal, if not only to kind of like create a safe space for someone in the moment to share, but to create a synergy with what I'm doing as far as work. So I'm like Anita. I hope that answers your question. But that's how I see it.
I mean, you guys are going above and beyond. This is amazing. And I'm so glad that you brought up all of those themes. As we unfortunately close out before the Q&A, I would love for each of you to just talk about a little bit around, for everyone who's here, we've got many people on listening in today. What sort of advice do you have for folks when they think about whether it's how they lean on or build community, how they request what they need, or how they live true, or as David so eloquently put it, how you move from the burden of shame to living fearlessly? What advice would you give to folks who are listening in, who may be on any part of that journey, dealing with any of that? And I'll start with you, Anita.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. I would just say that life is really short. like I know that, you know, I think I'm the youngest person on this panel, I think. So that sounds like a like old womany thing to say, but life is like very, very short. And it got to the point, like, so as I said, like in high school, I would turn down a lot of opportunities that would have me on like stage or talking, or like when I was younger, I would always try and avoid things that had to do with speech at all. That's why I was really drawn to sports and ways that I could express myself just without words. But life is short. I think I was 18. That there was this like play that I really wanted to do, but I was like, oh no, but you can't because you have. But then I was like, why am I limiting myself? Like, why am I saying no before anyone else can say no? Like, it's kind of like the best thing to do for yourself is just to say yes for that. And that's kind of what I tried to do all through college. Just say yes to things, say yes to opportunities, just say yes to life. It's really like the person that can hold you back the most, and what I just discovered was me, like for years. So yeah, I think that I would just say for my advice, I would say just say yes a little bit more often. That's what I would say.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Anita. Alfred, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I would just say in terms of mental health, self-management is something that you should definitely like take the time to do. So actually just I watched it actually last week. I s- I added Alchemy, which is this Black mental health app onto my phone after I saw it advertised on IG, and I listened to this really helpful piece around self-management. And the tips that they shared was basically to be able to identify when you are not yourself. So if you're coming across, you're a little bit more irritable than normal, you find yourself retreating, you find yourself not wanting to go out, you're not really speaking to your friends or your family, it's time to really kind of like do a check-in and see where you stand. So the second part of that is, one is to identify it, and two is to be able to do something about it. And so self-management is how you are actively, we all go through things, but that self-management piece, the second piece is around how you actively engage in something different. So that could be, making a plan. So making a plan is in like planning something. So I know on Thursdays I'm going to go do African dance, which I do on. If you ever at Brooklyn Academy of Music, let me know. I love African dance. So I know I have African dance on Thursday. I know that I go skating on Saturday. I know that, me and my friends, I'm going to go meet up with the guys for a drink, or the girls for a drink as well, on a day. Make a plan in the week so that you have something to look forward to. And the second part of that, another part of that, is to do something for yourself. I have a habit of retail therapy, which is not always economically friendly, but sometimes I go buy myself things just because, like, today was rough. Let's go get it. Let's go get a new shirt. And so there are things that you should do for yourself, and know that you treat yourself well. And then the third thing, so after you identified the change in yourself, two, you set up a plan to do something to take your mind off of it, either it's work or getting out the house. Three, talk to yourself like you would your best friend. So a lot of times our self-talk in our heads can be very negative, and it can take us down these windy roads. I would say talk to yourself as if you're talking to a mentee or a friend. You're not going to say the same things that you would to yourself. And so as you're getting through Monday to Thursday to get to your African dance class, manage your self-talk. So that would be 3 tips.
Oh, thank you, Alfred. And David, would love to hear from you too.
Well, I'm kind of going to expand on something Anita said and what Alfred said. Anita, you said about saying yes to yourself. And whenever I hear that, it reminds me of Nancy Reagan. Not that I'm a Nancy Reagan fan, but just say yes. That's what she would always say, just say no, right? So no, say yes to yourself. Yes, that you can do this, yes, that you can do that. And like you said, Anita, life is short, and whatever your age is, tomorrow is not promised to anybody. right? And as far as what Alfred had to say, it's all about the conversation you have in your head. Um, you have to live in the moment. I was telling you, Nancy, before about when I realized that I always lived fearlessly my whole life, and all of a sudden, with my depression, I found I was living in fear. And I remember this one day I was walking my dogs. I had two big golden doodles. They were big boys. They were like 90 pounds each. And I was walking them, it was 1 in the morning. And I just looked at these dogs and I thought, wow, they're not thinking about what happened an hour ago, a day ago, last week. They're just being dogs, walking along, sniff, 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 do their business, sniff, 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 and they were so in the moment and they were living fearlessly. And I thought, I used to be fearless. I'm going to start being fearless again. And when I did that, the whole world opened up to me. I started to notice different trees. The bark was different depending on the species of tree. The leaves were different. I noticed the behavior of, there's all kinds of little animals that come out at night, skunks and rabbits and foxes and all kinds of things like that. And I started to notice all of that. And when I was living in the moment, all of a sudden I was able to start conquering my fear. And as a result of that, I have a credo that I say to myself every morning. And I have a purpose. And my credo is to love fearlessly, to learn fearlessly, and to live fearlessly, and to live my best day today so that I can create my best tomorrow. So that's the conversation I have in my head now, instead of what do people think of me, or I'm afraid of this, or I can't do that, or I have this disability, or I have whatever it is. It's bigger. It'll be bigger in your head than it is actually in real life. And if someone else notices it, and if it's a problem for them, it's their problem. Don't let their problems be your problems. So live your life fearlessly. Use your life's experience. I also say to myself, I've committed, and I have it written down here, is I use my life's experiences to teach my daughter, who is the most important person in the world to me, how to live a powerful, fulfilled life full of love. And I read that to myself every day. And I also set out, I want to improve the lives of others by bringing a voice, opportunity, and power to the voiceless and the disempowered. So I've given myself a purpose, and I have a credo, and I live by that every day. And I try to give myself one thing to do each day, just one thing, right? And those one things will add up, and you're living your life then fearlessly. And that's what you do. So whatever your disability, I'm not saying it's easy, but you can do it. And don't believe those people who say that you can't. I was told I would never be able to go to university. I had to go to vocational college. Well, I've gone to 3 universities. I've gone in Canada, and I've gone to Temple University where I got my master's, and now I'm going to be going to law school. Or I went to law school, I'm going to be going to med school. So all of those people who said I couldn't do it, I have a better education than those people who said I couldn't. And everything that people have told me I couldn't do, I was told I couldn't play this semi-pro football league. I ended up playing in the league and doing really well at it. So don't let anybody define you or tell you what you can or can't do, because that's all up to you. And that's all.
I don't know
Wow,
why I
thank
couldn't.
you.
I was looking for the heart emoji. I can't do reactions, but I
Yeah.
would heart all those points, David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
and I hope, panelists, I hope that you've been looking at the chat, because there's so much love and affirmation happening right now. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing so openly and so vulnerably your stories, everything that you have experienced and gone through. I definitely, I think I could speak for a lot of the folks talking on the chat right now that, you guys have been an inspiration. And I just want to say thank you. So now I'm going to pass it over to Renee, because I know that there's some questions. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before the hour is up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all. This has been amazing. And please do take a few moments to read the chat because it is blowing up with love for you all. So thank you for everything. Just a few quick, easy ones. Alfred, someone asked you to repeat the name of the app that you mentioned.
Yes, it's called Alchemy, but it's not spelled like traditional alchemy. It's spelled Alkeme, alchemy.
Great, thank you. And some others asked if this recording, this fabulous recording, I think as it was put, is going to be shared. It will be shared out. We will follow up with everybody who registered with a link to the recording as soon as it's ready and available. And Alyssa mentioned in the chat that we are looking to build out a virtual Black community group of our network members. So if you're interested in that, please email us so we can continue this amazing dialogue. And we have a few minutes, so I'll just ask a few of the questions. One person said, I always feel less than when I try to show up as my best self, and my disability prevents that. How do you overcome the shame of needing to ask for help or explain your disability to others? And anyone who wants to answer, including Nancy, we'll put you in that mix. Anyone who wants to jump into that.
I can just say something quickly. I feel like that's a great question. I think that I struggled with that a lot, where I didn't know whether to say up front that I have a speech impediment or just to like go through the sentence and hope that it wouldn't come up. So I think that it's just important to know that anyone who wants to know you or wants to associate with you or like wants to occupy the same space as you needs to take you as a whole, not the half of you that you are presenting on the face. And your disability it's a part of you. So anyone who deserves to share your space should be able to help you, or you shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help, because that is like, you have to show up as who you are. And anyone that would be weird about that or act differently because of that doesn't deserve to share the same space as you. And that's kind of how I feel about it. So I usually just announce up front, like, hey, just to let people know I have a speech impediment. I'm not nervous. I'm not like, that's how I talk. And I think since then it's taken a lot of the pressure off of me, and I feel like I even like stutter less when it's just out there up front, and I can just go live my life and in that situation as who I am. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. If anyone else wants to jump in.
I can add, I realized that I didn't really share with the group my disability. So I have a physical disability called Klumpke's palsy that I was born with. And it's a spinal cord injury, and it affects my right arm. So I have very limited use of my right arm. And so you can see it when I walk into a room. And for the majority of my life, I struggled in the same way that the person who asked this question struggled around how I show up, because I didn't want to feel like I was less than. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me, because there are simply some things that I do differently. When I go into a room, I survey it in a way that most people don't think about, because I know that I need to see, okay, well, if I need to put my arm up, I need some help here. Or I need to think about how I am positioned at a desk because it's a spinal cord injury and it might cause me pain. And, honestly, what it came down to for me was that people can tell you how amazing you are, but until you believe it, it almost,
Yes.
it falls on deaf ears. And so for me, it was in college when I finally realized that I was bigger than this body. My personality, my love, what I bring to the table is bigger than my physical self. And to be honest, I'm out also here rolling with the big dogs, right? I'm rolling with everyone else. I'm doing what you're doing. I might just do it a little bit differently. And when I finally believe that about myself, and that I could do it, that's when I really started to feel less shame. Now I have absolutely no issue asking for accommodations. In fact, it's one of the first things I ask for, when I was both in business school and when I returned back to work after school. It's something I now feel comfortable with, but I spent the majority of my life not feeling comfortable And I got a lot of affirmation. I had a supportive family. I had supportive friends, but I didn't believe it. And it wasn't until I started to believe it that I actually started to see positive changes. And everybody's journey is different. There's no time on it. But really, it's what you feel like within you. And every single person who is on this Zoom right now is a powerful person. And the world needs you. The world needs your gifts, and you have to believe that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that also, and that you know, the things that Nancy and Anita have said are so true. But I'll also add that I recognize that um, we have reached that point where we don't let our disabilities affect us the way they have historically. And so if you haven't reached that point yet, um, try it will come to you in baby steps, but don't try not to paint today's colors or today's picture with yesterday's colors. Okay, so experiences that you've had in the past that may make you fearful, try and put them behind you. And even if you have to take a little step at a time, a little step at a time, you'll be amazed at the accommodations that are there, the people who will accept you for who you are. And there, you're always going to run into someone who maybe won't understand, or even will be unwilling to understand, because you run into that as well. But don't let them win. Don't let them hold you back. Don't let them defeat you. Try it, and you're going to survive. If you have a setback, it's okay. You're going to survive. You'll be okay, right? So, and just try it again and try it again, and you'll get there. You'll get there, and then you're going to be on a panel talking about it.
Thank you, David. It is a journey. I think someone used that word. I want to ask this last question. So if everyone could just stay with us for a couple minutes. Someone asked, have you ever started at a company where you felt truly celebrated for your uniqueness? What can other companies learn from that experience? I think that's a really important question. And then we will wrap up. So Alfred, do you want to start?
Yeah,
Great.
I could jump into that one. So at Goldman, we have this term that we say, bring your whole selves to work. And to the point shared earlier, we have conversations all the time around like imposter syndrome. And, some people have the view like, hey, I want to be able to come in and be my authentic self, do the work, show my value, and go that way. And some people say, I come in this mold, and they get to know me, they get to know my work, and then I unveil my authentic self. But to be honest, you should be celebrated for who you are regardless, and you should feel comfortable doing so. So when it comes to the firm, I shared that I identified as bisexual. I actually was out in high school. I went into the closet in college because I wanted to be known for myself, not my sexual orientation. And so when I interned at Goldman Sachs, I actually happened to be paired with a mentor from the Black Network who happened to be a Black gay man as well. This was through the Black Network. The sexual orientation thing didn't necessarily like come across, but I just happened to be able to see this person who is who was a vice president at the firm, a leader, a team lead, and I was able to see myself. So one, you need to make it a part of the culture to be accepting of all different folks, and really teaching people what it's like to be an ally, because more people are an ally than they probably are in the different communities, but an ally goes across the entire spectrum. And then I would also say that too, celebrate leaders in the firm that identify with these different intersections of identity, because allow them to be their full selves. Because when people are coming into an organization and you're making it a part of the culture and you're celebrating people who identify with these differences, it's a beacon of hope. It's a beacon of I can be that MD, I can be that managing director, I can be that vice president, I can be that team lead, because they look just like me. They have similar experiences that I do. And so that's how you really want to just bake it into the culture and allow role models to be visible from the top, so that it shines down and allows other people to kind of like lift as they climb as well.
Thank you, Alfred. That's a beautiful way to end. I think we could go on for another hour, but we all have to get on with our days, unfortunately. This was amazing, so powerful. Nancy, thank you for leading this conversation. Anita, Alfred, David, thank you for joining us and sharing your stories so openly. For all who joined us to listen today, we will be sharing out this recording. We encourage you to share it with everybody you know, because these are some powerful messages. And join the Lyme Network, join as a friend of the Lyme Network, or and join the Black community group that we are building. So again, thank you all and have a wonderful weekend.